Regardless if you believe it or not, we all have leadership potential in us. In some form or another, we all can be leaders. Some people naturally are able to unlock it themselves, while others need someone to show them the way to unlock it. Today, my guest George Penyak and I discuss various leadership topics such as transitioning from one leadership role to another, unlocking your own leadership potential, and advice on how to establish yourself as a new leader. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast, episode 65, Unlocking Your Leadership Potential with George Penyak. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast. And it doesn't matter if it's your 65th time listening to me or if it's your first time listening to me. Welcome to one, welcome to all. It's great to have you here, and it's an honor for me to be your host and founder, Scott McCarthy of the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast. Today, I bring back George Penyak, not for the first time, but for, his third time on the show. The guy is just that good. He's just that good of a guest. I had to have him on yet again. Because, let's face it, George and I just have some great conversations. But I won't dive into too much of the show just yet. What I'm going to do is quickly go over a couple of things here at the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast. And not just the podcast, the ecosystem, I'll call it now. Because guess what? It's growing. You don't know it right now. You don't see it right now. But in the background, I'm working on some really, really great things. I'm super excited. I'm super stoked. Not for anything for me, but for you. And it goes back to the whole mantra, the whole reason for the podcast and Moving Forward Leadership. I'm here for one reason and one reason only, ladies and gentlemen, and that's help you become a better leader. And it doesn't matter what type of organization you're in, I'm there to go out and find those world-class guests, those leaders who have been there. Not the ones who talk the talk, but the ones who have walked the walk. All right? And suck out the knowledge that they have to give it to you. So the podcast is just one platform, and I'm working on some new things in the background right now as I speak so that I can bring it in more ways for you. And that's about all I'm going to say about that for right now. Sorry, can't give it all the secrets away. You know how it goes, right? But I can tell you, I'm extremely stoked about what's coming down the line for the podcast, the site, the groups, and everything moving forward leadership. But that's enough of that. So I was going through my, Facebook history. You get those notifications, today, memories or whatever they refer to it as. And it popped up my discussion with George Penyak on my personal page. And I was just like, man, that was such a good chat. I got to have him back. And I reached out to George, even though we keep in pretty good contact. I said, George, it's been a year since you've been on the show. And, you know what? We both immediately said that he needed to come back. And boom, within days, we had a date lined up and a topic lined up for us to discuss. So what you're going to get today is a little bit different than the normal interview. It's not even going to be an interview. It's going to be a discussion between two leaders who are young, but yet seem to have found a way to unlock their potential, to rise through their relative ranks, to get the experience that they've gotten, and most importantly, succeed. Not them, but their teams. Their teams succeed. So that's what you're getting today, ladies and gentlemen. You'll hear George, and if you haven't listened to the first episode, just go to the show notes for this episode, movingforwardleadership.com/65. And the other two episodes are going to be there as well with George. Those being episode 30 and episode 50. Okay. And you can just use movingforwardleadership.com X for whatever episode number you want to check out, and it'll bring you right there. And that works for every single episode, okay, folks? But you'll hear from George, and you'll hear him talk about what he's doing now and how his role has evolved. And I don't want to take away too much from his thunder. I know right now is I usually like to do a bit more of an intro of my guests, but because he's literally the most frequent guest I've had on the show, I'm not going to bother to dive completely into his bio today. So with further ado, sit back, relax, and enjoy not my interview, but my discussion with George Penyak and how we can unlock our leadership potential. George, my man, welcome back. Welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. Super excited to be back. Wanted to jump at the opportunity to hop on another podcast with you. I think the first couple we did were really good. And so when we connected again, I said, absolutely, let's jump back in it.
Yeah, you are now the lead in podcast appearances here on Moving Forward Leadership. You realize that? You're up to.
I love it. No, I did not know that. I know this is my third because we did the first one, and then we did episode 50, which was really good. And so I'm just super grateful that you had me back on, and I just want to be able to provide as much value and good content as possible. I'm sure as you do as well.
Oh, for sure. And yeah, it was actually just over a year ago now at the time of recording at the middle-ish February. So about a year ago is when I had you on the first time. And then, episode 50 launched on the 20th of June. So yeah, man, you're the leader. You're definitely up and leading everybody with episodes.
I love it. I'm a competitive guy, so I'll take it. But it's interesting. So you mentioned that it's been so long since our very first conversation, and you and I were just talking about how so much has changed in both of our worlds. And I think we've got a great conversation we can have just around how leadership's evolved, what we're doing now. And I think I really think there's a lot of good stuff going on between where we were a year ago or a year and a half ago when we had our first conversation to where we are today.
So I just brought up our first conversation was launched 24th of Jan, episode 30. So
wow,
yeah. So not even 13 months ago, we had our first the release. I don't remember exactly when we recorded that. It might have been early Jan or maybe even late December. Who knows? But
and you've almost doubled that in your podcast. I think what you're doing is incredible. I think it fills a big gap in the podcast world right now. You seem to get a great variety of professionals and leaders, and I think you get a bunch of different perspectives. And so, I mean, to just think that January last year was episode 30, and now you've probably doubled that. You're probably on episode 60, 70 right now?
I launched 65 will go out in a couple of days.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Cheers. It's a great show going. So I'm just grateful to be back.
Oh, so as I told you before we hit recording this, it's kind of like, let's do some updates, and then for the audience out there, what we're going to do, we're going to get some updates from George, how things are going, because he's definitely got some big, big things that happened in him in just a short amount of time, just like you said. And what we're going to talk about is both George and I are relatively young for what we're doing, and I'm not trying to gloat or anything, but we're both relatively successful at what we're doing too. We're going to talk about how we've managed to unlock our own self-potential so that if you're in similar shoes, you're starting out or you're getting into it, well, you can back on our success and start using some of those tactics. So that's the plan for today. So slightly different. And, it's how I like doing things. I don't want to have the exact same type of, episode week after week, because it would just get mundane and boring anyway. Right.
I love it.
So George, what's been going on? I know, following you, we keep in touch relatively on social media, Facebook and Instagram and all that jazz. But for the audience out there, if you haven't listened to episode 30, so just hit pause right now. Go to episode 30, movingforwardleadership.com/30. Listen to my first episode, George, then come back to this one. So George, what's been going on past year, man? Give us the update.
It's been a wild year. So I think just quickly painting a picture for the audience, our our first conversation, episode 30, I was managing a team of about 8 team members across the Southeast United States. So I'm in sales. And I was put in a leadership position very early. I was very excited to offer the opportunity to lead a team, but I was actually the youngest and one of the least tenured members of those team in the company that I work for. And so now let's fast forward to where we are today. Here we are, February 2019. It's so weird to say still 2019. But, so what I do now is I've actually, I went from 8 direct reports, so leading a team of 8, to having 41, we'll call them indirect reports, where I have heavy influence.
Right.
But, I'm not approving expense reports and doing some of the mundane activities, but I'm there to lead them and guide them and make sure they're successful. And I span the entire coast, California to Florida, New York, everywhere here in the continental U.S. So that's been going on. Then on top of that, my wife, what she does full time is a travel agency. So we own a travel agency. It does about $3 million a year in sales. We got about 10 travel agents, and that thing is starting to really explode. It's called Penyak Travel. So not only am I leading a team of 41, but Jan and I are growing a small business and learning so much through that process, applying what I've learned in the private sector over to small business, and how do you scale and how do you lead, taking some of the leadership traits and things that I learned from my corporate job and applying that to small business. So a lot of good stuff happening. It's all good. I mean, things seem to evolve day by day, but yeah, learned a tremendous amount more than what I already knew 12 months ago from leading. And you can never, there's never end, or there's no master in leadership, right? It's something that you continually grow in. I don't think there is, you always hear like these, you're on Facebook and social media, and you have like these quote unquote leadership gurus, like they just have mastered it all. I just don't think you can ever have that mindset in leadership. I think you're always growing,
There's a couple different things. So just what you're ending off with there. One, there is no such thing as mastering in leadership as far as I'm concerned, because just like you said, you always need to keep learning. And I think people who have that mentality are making the number one epic failure mistake in leadership, and that is letting their ego get the best of them, right? And the second thing is there's also nothing new in leadership. People have been leading people since the beginning of time. However, what we need to continually realize and continue to focus on is, okay, you can't apply the lessons of, the 1200s to 2019. You need to put that overlay on them, right? And look at it through our context of today. Yeah, the core value, core lesson is there, but you need to put it in today's context and apply it in today's way. So those are two things that always just irk me when I see, those quote unquote leadership gurus. Yeah, I got it all mastered. No, you don't.
You don't.
You can't. I guarantee you, I can find you a scenario and you're going to scratch your head and go, I don't know what I need to do right now.
Absolutely. And I think when you hear the gurus or the experts or these people peddling leadership classes online for $120, if whatever segment or industry that you're leading in, whether it be public or private or even the military, I really think if you start thinking that you've got it all figured out, that's probably the second you start losing the people that you lead. And what I mean by that is you still have to be able at a high level to be a practitioner of what you're leading your people to do. So for example, I'm in the sales field, and I'm always gonna I call myself a player coach. And what I mean by that is, I need to be able to jump in and be a teammate of these guys and at a peer-to-peer level help them execute. But then I also need to step back and be able to coach them as well. So, but if I lose that player mindset where I'm not really sure, I lose that, you say you let that tool get a little dull, well, then you're really going to start losing a grip for what your team is doing in the quote unquote trenches. And I think the people that think they've mastered leadership probably don't want to get their hands dirty and don't want to get in the trenches. Well, that's the second you start losing your team.
100% agree with you, man. And it's funny. I'll throw a personal story there. When I showed up and I was the head instructor for transportation officer basic course. And so basically new guys just either finishing up their university, going through their basic level training before they head off to their first operational units. And I was the course director. So my actual role wasn't actually a instructor role, it was more administrative role. And then as I was doing up the instructor calendar, I said, all right, I'm going to take these periods here, these periods here, these periods here. And the other instructor was like, well, why are you teaching? You have better things to worry about. I'm like, listen, if I'm going to be the head of this course, I need to show the guys and gals that I have some actual street cred.
Exactly.
Right. And I've actually got some experience behind me that shows them that, yes, I've been in the trenches. I've done the work. I have the experience. That's why I'm here as the course director. And what I end up referring to myself as the lead instructor. It actually is my own made up title, but it's just the way it was. I was there, and it's like, no, they need to see that. They need to understand that it's not just the rest of you guys. It's also me as well. So
absolutely. So what, I'm glad you said that. What's changed? You asked me what's changed with me over the last year. What's changed in your world over the last, I guess, since we last spoke last January?
Oh, just this 13.5-pound little critter thing that showed up.
Congratulations, by the way.
Yeah, I know. No, just that's a joke. So we gave birth to our second son, which I know you're tracking and the audience is tracking. But the biggest thing is, I gave up my command billet. That was where I was commanding 200 soldiers here, and I shouldn't say gave up. It was just that my time was done, and that's the way it works, right? We get 2 years, and that's it. Your time is done. So I handed off command of that in July of 2018, and I've been on believe it or not, French language training ever since, and that will go until this summer. Wow. So they want me to get up to basically what's referred to as the executive level profile. I'll just leave it there, the Cole's Notes version. And then this coming summer, I'll be moving to Toronto, and be taking another 10-month course as a master's program in defense studies, which should all but not secure my promotion. And then I'll see what's happening with me after that. So,
wow.
Yeah, it's a bit crazy. Yeah, it's a bit crazy. It's a bit busy. My plan is still keep pushing through on the podcast and all this. We'll see what the impact is. The once a week recordings may have to slow down. I'm not sure. We'll wait and see, but that is still the plan. I'm still going to keep pushing, keep moving forward on this thing because I enjoy it too much.
Oh, I'm with you. I love it. My wife and I, we do a podcast too for our travel agency. It's not around leadership or anything, but it's around, destination reviews, places we've gone. We try to give as much content as we can to our audience. We're not very salesy. We're not big into just asking for business. We just want to provide the best content as possible. So we do a weekly podcast. It's been a ton of fun. Like sometimes we'll just have a glass of wine and pull the mics out and just start talking. But no, I love it. That's interesting. One thing you said though, I want to kind of hone in on because I think you and I experienced the same thing over the last 12 months. So I clearly, when I moved on to this national role I'm in now, I had to pass my team on to somebody else. Sounds like you did the same thing. I want to ask you, I know I'm kind of flipping, the host guest here on you, but
all good.
Emotionally, what was that like? How did you feel about that? I know you're moving on to a bigger role, kind of very similar to what I did over the last 12 months, but I'm sure we experienced the same things, but I want to tee it up to you first.
It sucked.
Yeah.
To put it bluntly, it sucked. Although I knew when it was coming, the day I took over command, I started literally thinking about the day that I would leave command, and my whole reason at work, probably, I would say roughly around March timeframe onwards to July. I wouldn't say the whole reason, but it became more and more important in my day-to-day work was preparing for handover. And the way I look at it was, I could do this one of two ways, right? I could not care and think that my replacement is going to do whatever the heck she wants anyway. So give her the keys, give her a few briefings by a few of the people, let her know a few of the key concerns and key files that are ongoing right now, and let her roll with however she's going to do it, which oddly enough happens more than what I would like to say. or I could have the very active way and prepare and take detailed notes, do an extensive handover. Like, so what I ended up doing was I started around this time last year with a OneNote doc, which I ended up sharing with her probably around late May of last year. And everything that popped by and popped in my head came across my desk. I would write in this OneNote doc at the end of the day, and I kept populating it with different processes and files that I knew would be ongoing. So the background of those files and anything that I felt that would be important to her down the line, so that when she got on the ground, she would actually have, a couple steps forward. And then we had a week together. So, well, not a week. We had 3 days of solid meetings, presentations, meeting all the key players that I worked with, all this jazz, blocked, like 3 days just completely blocked. And then on the Thursday morning of the week is when we signed off and handed off. I handed off command to her, and that day it was just like, man, this sucks. I'm not ready for this. As much as I was ready for it, I'm not ready for this. So yeah.
I agree with you because I think we both consider. I mean, like I say, we're never masters and leaders, but I really feel like the same way. I mean, it sucked. I mean, I remember I was going on to a bigger role and I was excited for, my future and the next steps there. But when you really drive a team successfully, you get caught up in it emotionally and you get excited when you see your team members successful, and that you're like 130% committed to their success.
Yeah.
And then when you step away from that, it almost bothers you. I mean, I know that the team members, they struggle with, like, who am I going to report to? Who's going to be my leader? Who's going to guide me through this chaos, if you will. But I think it's equally as tough on the leader to just walk away from that, even though you're making the next step. You're broadening your span of control or whatever you're doing. It's just really hard because I think the good leaders out there care so much and they want to see the team do so well. It's hard to walk away, and it's not that you're walking away, to your point. It's like, it's you have to do at the end of the day what's best for yourself and think long term. But in that small window of the time you walk away, it's extremely challenging. I think for every good leader out there that had a team that is fully engaged and committed to the team's success, it's really hard to do that.
No, it totally is. And it's even worse for me because I'm still in the same base. So I still see all my old, right? So I still see all the old, my former subordinates. Occasionally I'll still have lunch with my former second in command and stuff like this. And, we catch up and they'll let me know what's going on. And occasionally I'll hear something and I'll just like, and I'll kind of like bite my lip, because it's not how I would do it, but I'm not there anymore, right?
It's not my call anymore.
No, it's not my call anymore. It's none of my business anymore. But you still like bite your lip, you bite your tongue. You're just like, and you still hope for their success. And I still, can't wait to hear what happens with them, what's going to transpire with them. And it's funny, around, when was it? Not too long ago, I think just after Christmas, I got an email from a former private. Now, keep in mind, I'm a major and a private, so I'm senior middle management in the full forces. And then I get a private who is the lowest on the full totem pole. And she's telling me about all the things that were going on. Now, she got posted out, so she got transferred after my first year in command. And she sent me this email. She got advance promoted and she got all this. She's getting this. She's applying for that. All these great things happening to her. And I remember before she moved, she was like dreading the posting because she moved to Ottawa. And she was like, I love it here. I don't want to move to Ottawa. I said, listen, every posting is what you make of it.
Yeah.
And like you go into is like, and you translate that for the civilian folks that are, it doesn't matter. Every job that you go into is what you make of it. Sure, you can have horrible bosses and crappy team, but still, if you make the best of it, it's still going to be great. So I kept telling, reinforcing that message to her until she left. So, fast forward to this just past Christmas, and she sends this great glowing email to me. And most people would be like, who the heck is this private, now corporal, emailing me?
Yeah.
At my rank level. But I hit reply. I'm like, that is amazing. All in caps, right? And I'm like, so happy for you, blah, 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 blah. And it's just because you want to see your people succeed.
Yeah.
when you're deep in with them, you want to see them succeed, because their success to me shows that you're actually doing a good job.
Absolutely. And I couldn't agree more. And one of the biggest things that I learned in my very first leadership role was, and this was tough because in the private business world, especially in sales, you have a lot of egos, you have a lot of things going on within your company, and you go from being the rock star, like it's all about you, all the accolades, success. You hop into that leadership role for the first time, and it's actually flipped now. It's nothing about you. And you have to go into that with the mentality of it's not about you, it's about them. Mm-hmm. Make them successful, and you'll in return be successful. So stop thinking forward in, think about externally back into you. You know what I mean? It's like you always got to think from their perspective, have empathy, show empathy. But, I really think that's a big transition to make. And, going into this role I'm in now, and you and I were talking about how we're both relatively young. And I think, actually, I know I'm probably the youngest person in my company in the role I'm in today at a national scale. But one thing that I learned in my first role that I learned pretty quickly, my first leadership role is, if there's other young people out there that are eager to get into, whether it be a management role, higher rank in the military, you got to look at that age as just a number. And I think this is going to sound kind of weird. Like, this sounds kind of weird for me to say, and I hope I'm articulating it correctly. But don't assume that somebody else does a better job or knows more than you do. You always have to go into it with an open mind and have some sort of self-discovery. So I think there's a fine line you have to have between, let's say, if you have a mentor and then your own self-discovery. Because I think if you always assume someone that's older or it's been around longer knows more than you, it's going to hold you back from your own potential. And I think you just have to have that self-discovery so that, take a few risks, go with your gut. Don't always default to what someone else has told you should be the right way to do something. I think that's something that I've definitely benefited from. And I'm, full transparency, I'm 32 years old, 41 indirect reports. I just left the job with 8 direct reports, whom all were older than me. And I think even when I started, I still had that mindset of, okay, what would my old boss do? Like, my old boss had my job. I'm like, what would he do? What would he do? You can't think like that. If you're gonna keep moving forward, you have to be able to form your own opinion. Take what people say, right? You know what I mean? Like, take in what they say, take nuggets of information, but dissect it yourself and form your own opinion. I think that's I know that's one thing that held me back when I was younger and early in my career, is I just assumed that, everyone older than me and more tenured than me did everything better than me, and that's not the case.
Nope. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, how we got to take lessons from before, but use it in today's context, right? And
yep.
And that's when you ask those questions, what will my old boss do, or whatever. And that's what you got to do when you go out and get advice. And I think we're kind of dovetailing perfectly into the second part of the show here on unlocking potential within ourselves. And to say that my advice to people is, take advice, but you also you can't just take it blindly, i.e. you have to look at your situation compared to the situation that the other person was in. Listen to what they did, what their lessons are, but you still have to make your own analysis in the context of the situation you are facing, because no two situations are going to be the same. No matter what, I don't care what you say. You can have, quote unquote, the exact same thing happen to me, to someone else. But the reality is we're talking about two different, multiple different people, and no two people are identical. So you can't say the situation is exactly the same. So yes, you take the lessons, you look at it in the context of the situation you're in, and then you go ahead and make your analysis and apply however you see fit.
100%. I mean, I couldn't agree more. And every situation is going to be different. And especially if you find parallels with your peers and how they got to where they are, you always have to take in everything you can externally, like take nuggets of what people have told you on their stories and how they got to where they are and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, you got to go with your gut. And Simon Sinek has a great TED talk on why. like what the
Yeah.
the meaning behind why and what the why is. Have you seen that?
Oh yeah. I've seen it. His talk of meaning why. Yep, for sure.
It's incredible, and if you don't understand the why behind something, that's why you become indecisive. And what that, like, when people say like they make a gut decision, when they make a gut decision not to do something, it's typically because they don't understand the why behind their being asked to do something. So I always have taken that approach to leadership, and that kind of we're kind of going off on a tangent here, but that for me, that goes back to transparency, to being as transparent as possible. Because if you can show someone, for example, someone on your team, the why behind you have to change the way you did something, whether it be a corporate change or personal change, that helps that team member grasp it, understand it, run with it. And I think no matter how high you get, even if you're the CEO of the company, you still have to have that connection to your team on being able to articulate why things are happening, be as transparent as possible. And then on the way there, no two stories are the same. So take in information and go with your gut. Because, at least in my career, there's very few times that my gut has led me wrong. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. You've gotten, you got this promotion as we talked about. You're up to 41 people, not all direct, but so what have been some of the things over your up to your career now, and short career it has been now, that you've used for yourself to unlock your own individual potential? Because obviously this promotion is a reflection of how well you're working. The fact that you are the youngest guy in your role across the country tells me that you got something good going on personally. So what are some of the things you've done to unlock the potential within yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. To get where I'm at today, I think going back to the main thing I would say that's propelled me to get me where I'm at today is kind of going back to what I said earlier, is I've always been a practitioner of my craft. So I'm in sales today, and even as a manager, I've always wanted to be a great manager, but I still at my core want to be a great salesperson, and I want to be able to do better for my customers, whether they're all customers are the company's customers, but like, you have team members that say, well, that's my customer. Well, that's our team's customer. But I would always stay close to being a practitioner. There were times where I would go with a team member to a meeting, and they would assume, oh, my boss is with me, so I'm going to lead the meeting and try to do a good job. And I think all salespeople can relate to this. But there will actually be times where I'm like, hey, let's go back and forth with each other. Let's tag team the meeting. Maybe I'll pilot, you co-pilot, or you co-pilot, and, we'll flip it on each other. And I never have been a leader, when you're at the lower level leadership levels, to just immediately step away from being a great practitioner of your craft. And I think that's really helped me, because in the role I'm in now, like, the higher up you go, the better you have to be almost at being a practitioner, but also you still have to even be that much better at being a leader. And I think that's what really gets you to the next level. And that's one thing that I've never let go of, and I don't think I ever will. And who knows, maybe if you get to the executive level, it's to my own fault that I still want to be a great practitioner of my craft. But, so far it feels right to me, and it's helped me personally be a better leader to the people that I lead. And I think it's very important.
I would wholeheartedly agree with you 100% the whole way, man. Even if you do make that executive level, because end of the day, being a professional and expert in your craft, that's your core foundation. And once that starts crumbling, that's when you start losing touch, right? And
oh yeah,
and I've seen it. I've seen people who've lost touch with the foundation, and they're making decisions and calls, and you're just like, that doesn't reflect reality. That doesn't reflect reality on the ground. So why are you making this decision? It makes absolutely no sense.
That's a great point. Like, if you're not in touch with getting your hands dirty and getting your feet on the street and doing the things that your team's doing day to day, because the more people you have in one role, that's really driving the overall team. Like, you know what I mean? It's those individuals day in and day out that are the feet on the street or the boots on the ground. That's how successful you're. You're only as good as your weakest focused person. So if you're not in the trenches there with them and not in tune to what's going on today, don't be the leader that said, oh, when I was doing this 10 years ago, this is how it was. That's a very, like, and you and I've had them, I'm sure you've had them, where, it's you have a leader and they're like, well, when I was doing when you were doing, in 1992, it's
back
like
in the day,
you lost credibility right off the jump. And I think you have to maintain that credibility. And I think it goes a long way for your people to show that you still want to get your hands dirty. And I mean, it really and it helps when you have to battle through the tough times, that you have that credibility with your team.
100%. I believe in it so much. It's actually one of the 9 foundations in my ebook, 9 Foundations of Leadership. Right? Like,
oh, really? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's there. You got to have that whatever professional confidence. And even in your case, right? I'll take your example. You're in sales. You're always selling to somebody.
Yep.
No matter what you're doing, you're always going to be selling to somebody. You're either selling to a potential vendor or buyer. You're selling to your people down to get their buy-in and the vision. You're selling upwards to your bosses of what your plan is, how you want to go about doing things. So you're always selling somebody something. It's just how you want to look at it, right? And other way to look at it is influencing or motivating, blah, blah, blah. But you want to look at it in a term of you're selling. So keep rolling with it, right? Keep rolling, keep mastering that craft for sure, because it's just going to keep helping. And as people, the listeners out there, as you progress your careers, you cannot lose sight with that. Whatever your organization does, whatever your role is, you can't lose sight with that foundation of what you guys actually do. Because once you start losing sight with that, that's when problems start happening.
Yeah, you got to see the forest of the trees.
Yeah.
And, one thing too, another topic I want to touch on, as I've grown into the role I'm in now, and now I've got 41 team members. I'm at a national scale, so I'm dealing with a lot of feet on the street. I'm dealing with a lot more internal departments that maybe I didn't touch as much before. But you just come across different personalities. You come across, you really start to learn what motivates other people. And one thing that's helped me balance it all, and I can't remember, I think it was actually my first VP of sales. Her name was Sarah Sampson. She's an absolute rock star. She said, assume positive intent. And I think if you go into every situation, and I really take that to heart, no matter what I'm doing day to day, like just living your life, the people you interact with, if you assume positive intent, no matter what kind of situation you come across, you can really form a stronger bond and have a better understanding. Because the second you start assuming someone did something in a negative light or at the detriment of you, then you really start losing touch with being able to moving any situation forward or moving yourself forward. So I'm a big believer in assuming positive intent in any situation, any person you come across, whether it be a direct report, indirect report, your boss. I think that's a very healthy way to manage things day to day.
I couldn't agree with you more, because I always say trust immediately, right?
Yep.
99% of the world's population out there mean to do the right thing. Sometimes they make mistakes, but you know what? The intent was there to do the right thing. And if you can't trust your team, then you're going to get sucked up. Your time's going to get sucked up with the needless, I wouldn't say piddly things that don't matter. That's not true. But what you shouldn't be worrying about. You have bigger and better things to worry about. In your case, you have 41 people. You can't be worrying about, number two's what his schedule is for next week. You need to be worrying about down the line for your region that you're controlling, that you're overseeing, right? So too many people, they don't, I don't trust, or it's almost impossible to gain my trust. Well, you know what? Is that the actual right way to go about it? Because you're just going to have your people working way harder than what they need to, wasting their time, you wasting your time because you're overseeing way too much and not worrying about the real things that you need to worry about.
Yeah.
And your company is not moving forward as fast as what it should be or could be. So, no.
Absolutely. I mean, if you can't, if you can't reverse engineer as a leader, if you can't reverse engineer why someone did something, like say it's right or wrong, whatever situation you're coming across, if you can't reverse engineer why they did what they did or why they made the decision they made, you're not going to be able to make them better performers. If you can't see from there, and that goes back to my big thing on empathy and showing you of empathy, is you have to be able to understand from their perspective why they did something. And you can almost, like whenever I'm involved in a situation with multiple different parties, I can almost see one party pointing the finger at the other, and I can see they're not even understanding where this person's coming from. They're just on the pointing the finger, and I'm like, if they took a step back and just had a little empathy, assume positive intent, to really break down why someone said something or did something or made the decision they made, well, then we can move the ball forward. But the second you just build the wall and point the finger, and that can be as a leader, that can be peer to peer, there's multiple different facets that those situations happen. You're just not going to move forward. It's going to be bad for all parties involved. So
I like it. In fact,
it may slow things down, but it's healthy to take it back.
Yeah, for sure. I like it. One of the things I always tell my guys that I'm, either mentoring or coaching, whatever, is like, okay, something didn't go the way you want it. Now reverse engineer that whole process or flow of how you went from information given to acceptable end product. Because guess what? Most of the time, and I mean a significant portion most of the time, the reason why that you got the unacceptable end product was at the beginning something was lacking or unclear from you as the leader, right? And so it kind of like, and you see people like, what do you mean? Like, no. And it basically that has morphed itself into what I'm starting to dub, and I'm kind of taking this off of Jocko Willink's methodology too, but extreme leadership. Either your people are the reason for your success, but you as the leader, you're the reason for the organization's failure.
I love it.
Right? Because like you've said, and we've said a bunch of times, they're the ones that are pounding the roads. They're the ones doing the calls. They're the ones getting the sales. They're getting the cash flow in, products out, whatever. If that doesn't occur, then you failed as the leader to either provide them the adequate training, provide them the adequate scope, provide them enough resources, failed to get the right product, whatever.
Yep.
Right. So
you have to take full ownership and accountability for your team. You can't, as a leader, even if you're a middle tier leader or even the leader on the feet of the street, you can't pass the buck. That team ends with you. And so when they're successful, it's all about them. When things fail, so when you're successful, you're praising them. It's all about them. You didn't do a thing. You want to give them the biggest spotlight possible. But when they fail, you take all the heat. So it's great leaders, honestly, if you looked at it, if you look at the core of it, it sounds like a very lonely place. It sounds that way. It's really not. But like if you just took it at face value saying it is all about the team and then it's not about you anymore. But if things go wrong, it's 100% about you. And I think if you have that mindset going into leadership, you're going to do much better off, especially for those looking to get in their first leadership role. You have to be 1,000% accountable for everything, good, bad, ugly, indifferent. It's all on you. And I think if anyone takes that approach to their career, like even if you don't have direct reports and you're not in a leadership position yet, everything's on you. If you let something bother you, like if you have something going on externally in your life and you let that bother you and interfere with, don't blame that situation. Blame yourself for not being able to separate it because, everything's a choice. And I know everyone goes through their lumps and things happen in their lives, but it's how do you deal with it and how are you going to let it affect what you're really trying to do? And, I think if you take that same level of ownership in your first leadership position, you'll be a lot more successful than going in without that mentality.
I love that whole accountability piece. And actually, I'll throw out a personal story there and say it's even actually beyond just your team, but actually even showing accountability for yourself first and foremost. So when I first got out to my first operational unit out in Edmonton, I took over the lead for the extra duties, and that's nothing to be proud of. So extra duties, basically you get served when you do a mistake. But the thing was, I was always the guy showing up saying, yep, I messed up. And a
Yeah.
little bit, right? And it actually got to the point where they're like, okay, extra duties obviously isn't working for you, Scott. We're going to give you something else. But I liked using that example with, especially the new officer cadets and second lieutenants are coming through, because I tell them I'm like that position before I took over, as in the extra duty king at one service battalion, was held by Mr. Chuck Lamar. Anybody know who Chuck Lamar is? And people will kind of scratch their heads. I'm like, as in Lieutenant General Chuck Lamar, as in 3 Leaf, only 1 below the Chief of Defense Staff. Not to say that I'm going to become a lieutenant general anytime soon, but the fact is that you learn accountability for yourself, and then you apply that to your organization, your teams, and it's just going to do really great things. And obviously, General Lamar, if he's ever listened to this podcast, sir, he's in a good spot, and it's been helping me in my career as well. So do you have any other, couple other quick tips for people to help unlock their own potential and things that have helped you throughout your time so far?
Yeah, especially when it comes to potential, I think, another thing that has helped me propel myself, I guess, to get me to my potential is I've never put a ceiling on myself. The second you think that, like, it goes back to my point of don't assume someone knows more than you. The second you start thinking that, you're like, okay, well, if they know more than me, then that's my ceiling. I'm not going to be able to get there because I don't know that yet, or I'm not old enough yet, or I'm not tenure enough yet. That's a bunch of BS. The second you put a ceiling on yourself, that's your ceiling. No matter if you think, oh, I hope I get this, hope I get that. But if you really truly believe, well, that's your ceiling. That's it. And you've already lost. And I think you have to be able to punch through that. Remove all ceilings. I mean, truly believe that the sky's the limit for yourself. And like, I go into every job and every opportunity and every leadership position thinking that, if I can do a good job here, I could be the CEO one day. And if you don't think if you ever, I haven't done it myself, but if you polled CEOs and executives and asked them, hey, did you ever believe you'd be an executive one day? They would probably all say, yeah, I've always been confident that I would be an executive one day. But when you're new in your career and you're younger, a lot of those people might not have those beliefs. But it's really to get there quicker and accelerate your career, don't have those beliefs. Go into it with a completely open mind. Be comfortable tackling tough situations, going back to being accountable, and that'll help you punch that ceiling if you're putting one on yourself. And age is just a number. It really is. I mean, there's some very impactful people around this world that aren't that old. And you and me, I mean, it's just a number. I look at what we're doing and, other people that might be a little bit less tenured than us or newer in the military, newer in the private world. But wow, I mean, they're doing an incredible job. And it's like, well, you just grab the bull by the horns and don't assume that I know. Like, I would tell a new salesperson in my company today, I would say, don't assume I know more than you. Like, find out for yourself, form your own opinion, and go after it. You know what I mean? And I think that's how you learn too. I think it's a really good approach to learning and growing.
Absolutely. Love it all. Yeah. I think, once you put that seal in there, it's too late. You're already done, really.
Exactly.
And that's kind of what you hinted at. I think one of the things I like to push out there is, I remember when I was going through to college and I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to just get my university degree and that's it. I'm done. I don't need to worry about any further education, blah, blah, blah. God, I would love to go back and strangle the crap out of 21-year-old Scott McCarthy.
Oh my gosh. I hear you. I mean, 21-year-old George.
Right? Because,
but also, I mean, there's so many things. Because I mean, at one point when I was that young, when I was in college, I just, you think you're college, that's it. I'm gonna get a good job. And, I don't know where the flip happened, but it's not, you something happens. I don't know.
It does.
That's the magic. If you can figure out why or how or how that happens. But something flipped me where I said, you know what? I can do what they're doing. I can do it, you know, and I've removed all barriers, and that is really what's propelled me. You know what? I've had my failures too. It's not like you're not going to come across failures. If you're going to go in with that go-getter mentality, you're going to take your lumps, but each lump makes you better. And that's what it's about. And if you keep the ceiling on you, you won't even take the lumps. Like you won't grow. You'll be steady and happy. And hey, that's great. If you're happy and you want to stay where you're at, no problem. But if you have that inclination that you might want to make a run at a nice leadership role, or even beyond that, you know, take chances.
Yeah, 100%. It's funny. You're right. It is a switch. It's just like a light switch, goes from off to on, and all of a sudden, I end up finishing my master's in business on my own, distance learning, all by myself. Heck, I was like traveling through South America, writing papers on my second last semester, doing a work trip plus doing an MBA. It was crazy. And then, you know, now I'm moving on this summer, and that's going to be another master's program. And then I'm like, I wonder what's next. It's just like, where the heck did that happen? I don't know. But I think the moral of the story for the listeners out there, and what I always like telling the young guys is, the day you stop learning, the day you stop wanting to learn, is the day you become useless to your organization, right? Because the world's always changing. And, you know, it could have changed. We don't know. Like, it could have changed since we got on this call. Geez, almost 50 minutes ago now. We're going to wrap it up soon, George.
Well, I love talking to you because we get going, and I mean, we can talk leadership forever. I mean, we can keep going leadership forever. How it evolves.
But the moral of the story, I'll wrap up, and I'll throw you the mic one more time, and then we'll close out. But the moral of the story is, like I said, the world's ever changing. So when you stop learning, you stop being useful, because an organization needs to continually adapt to the changing world. So for listeners out there, do never, ever stop learning. And that's why, to cycle back to the beginning of the conversation, when you're talking about those gurus who say they have mastered all, I'm going to say bullshit. No, because it's ever changing.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, if I could end the show with one thing, just to emphasize, I guess, when you're dealing peer to peer, and then also, you know, with team members that you lead, I think one thing I really believe in too is be decisive in what you believe in. And whether that be in a debate with your partner internally that, you know, say you're in sales and they're in operations, and your peers, but you have operations leader, sales leader. So you have to be able to decide and make decisions together. Be decisive in decisions that you make, but also, if you're wrong, own it. Don't be scared to be wrong. And I think there's a lot of leaders that are like, oh, if I say the wrong thing, that's embarrassing, or it's going to make me look bad. Some of the smartest people in this world are very humble and will say, oh, I was wrong about that. And that's okay. And I think that was part of the switch for me too, is not always thinking I always had to be right, and I always had to check every box and had to be perfect. And if you rely on perfection, it's just not going to happen for you. I think you have to be okay being wrong, and you have to have the humbleness to acknowledge that you were wrong in something, and put your ego to the side. And, you know, there's so many different things. I think it's like a perfect cocktail to really see in a leader accelerate through the military or through the private world or in the public sector. But I think some of the smaller things you can do is don't be scared to be wrong. And if you are, own it.
Those are great final words, man. Outstanding. The only thing I'd add is perfection is a myth. Doesn't actually exist, because every plan at some point will have some kind of imperfection into it. It doesn't matter. So for all the people out there, you know, the 80% solution delivered on time or early is always going to be better than 100% solution, or the quote unquote 100% solution than late. Yeah. George, my man, I love talking to you. But we're going to have to wrap up, or the audience is going to be like, holy crap, this is going to be like a 5-hour podcast. You know, I know you don't have a ton of them, but how can people reach you? What resources? Feel free to pitch the whole travel business, because you know what? Leaders need a break too, right?
Absolutely. No. So best ways to reach me are on LinkedIn, George Penyak. There's not many of me out there. Very unique name. GeorgePenyak.com, LinkedIn. You can always email me, George@PenyakTravel. A couple things I have been working on that I haven't talked about earlier. I had a book come out called the Sales Success Stories book. I was a contributing author to that. I had 3 chapters, and it's a book. So if you're in sales, I would check it out. It's on Amazon. Full disclosure, I don't get any royalties. So if you buy it, I'm not like pitching this to make my own money. I really think it's a ton of good content. A guy named Scott Ingram, who does a sales success story podcast, literally got the best of the best salespeople from around the country in some very high respective organizations, took their top 1% performers and had them write a book. And it's got great content in it, both on leadership and sales. And then, and if you guys ever need a trip, please check us out, Penyak Travel. It's an extremely fast-paced, growing business, zero-fee agency. We don't charge any fees. And feel free to hop over to the Know Before You Go Travel show, which is our travel podcast. It's a ton of fun.
It's awesome. For the audience, I'm going to throw it all out there in the show notes. So just go ahead, check out the show notes, and you'll see all those resources and links that George mentioned. Well, man, I love having you on because of that just pure fact. Most of the guests I have on the show have, some kind of platform they're pitching, right? It's generally because of a book that they've written, and they're explaining the principles behind the book and how it relates to organizational theory, leadership, whatever. You and I, we're like 2 buddies having a conversation, geeking out over leadership and just trying to provide advice to listeners out there. And that's, I think personally, these are my favorite episodes. So
I love it, man. No, me too. And I think we both have a mutual mindset around leadership. And I think we've got a lot of the same qualities and traits that have gotten us where we are today.
100%.
And that's why, like you and I, we can talk forever. Like, I'm dead serious. Like the things I do in leadership when I do podcasts and the books, I don't do this stuff for I'm not pitching anything. I mean, my wife and I have a travel agency. I have my corporate job, and the book I did, I spent a lot of time on that, but I'm literally zero royalties. I mean, nothing off of that, and I just don't care. I just want to be able to provide good content at the end of the day. And if it helps somebody, great. And I'm going to keep doing my thing.
It's the marks of a true leader, just there to help, right? All right, my man. It's been a blast chatting with you. I think we're going to roll over into a off-air conversation still, but for the audience, I'm going to let you guys go now.
Thanks, everybody.
Right, take care. And done. Hope you guys enjoyed that discussion between George and I. I know I definitely did. In fact, I enjoyed that conversation so much. George and I were actually on Zoom, I think for another 30 to 40 minutes after we got off the air here. So just a few things I wanted to point out before I leave you folks go. I mentioned at the beginning of the show some new and great things coming to Moving Forward Leadership. And to make sure you don't miss out, you want to be a part of the mastermind. Okay? I didn't mention the mastermind at the beginning of the show, but I'm going to mention it now. And you're probably like, what's the mastermind? If you're new, you're wondering what I'm talking about, the mastermind. The mastermind is where I invite all the guests, like George. George is in there. Chris Williams from a couple weeks ago is in there. John Conrad is in there. Heather Younger, in there. Keisha Rivers, in there. Should I keep going or stop? I think you get the point, so I'm going to stop. Anyway, the guests are in there, and it's open to you, free of charge, to be in there as well. And I am in there daily, posting, talking, shooting articles, doing whatever I can to provide value to you so that you get the most out of it. And I hinted at new things to come. And that is where the first people are going to be notified of what is actually around the corner for Moving Forward Leadership. And in fact, they already have a little hint at what's coming. So if you're not in the mastermind, what are you waiting for? It doesn't cost you anything. The benefits are astronomical. Just go ahead and join. All right. All you need to do is go movingforwardleadership.com/mastermind, or check out the show notes. You'll find the link there, and bam, you just need to answer a couple quick questions, hit join, and I'll let you right in. And don't forget to introduce yourself when you do get that in, all right? Let people know you're there and what you're all about. All right, folks, I'm going to let you go until next week. Remember, R squared, S squared, if you really love the show. Rate and review. Not that I get up higher on the charts or anything, but for people who are scrolling through, they actually do check those out. And you know what? It helps them. When you rate and review shows, like, hey, let people know this is worth their time. It's obviously worth yours because you're listening to me right now. Okay? So that's R squared. S squared. Subscribe. If you're not subscribed, make sure you hit movingforwardleadership.com/subscribe and never miss another episode today. And that link will work for any and all platforms out there, all right? I got you all covered. And then finally, share. Share this with someone who is just starting their journey, all right? Let them know that they're not alone. There are resources out there for them. They do not need to become another one of those freaking bosses, all right? They can become true leaders. People who motivate, inspire, lead, not push, not put down, or destroy. Okay? All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to leave you. As always, keep pushing, keep trying, keep moving forward. Take care now.